Rygart immediately gets back on his feet upon reading the letter from his childhood friend and heads out after changing his clothes and packing his bag. While his younger brother keeps calling for him from behind, he consoles the lad by promising to get him some gifts. We learn that Cruz is a continent without oil, but its people possess the unique ability to control quartz, which they use to create flexible ligaments for transportation and weaponry. Individuals of varying strengths hold this power, but Rygart's condition is an exceptional occurrence that manifests infrequently. He cannot manipulate quartz, thereby indicating an absence of magical aptitude. After traveling through the desert for 5 consecutive days on foot, Rygart collapses due to thirst, but luckily Balder, the general of Krishna, comes to the rescue. Balder finds it surprising that Rygart doesn't have any magic. Simultaneously, a conflict ensues between the golems of Athens and Krishna. During the engagement, Cleve finds herself on the brink of defeat at the hands of Krishna's golems. However, the arrival of Captain Zess with reinforcement tips the balance of power, resulting in the retreat of the Krishna army. Balder and Rygart make their way to the capital of Krishna, Benantin. Balder brings Rygart to the castle, where Queen Sigyn greets him. She questions Rygart about his absence at her wedding at gunpoint, to which he responds with reluctance, citing his busy schedule. However, Queen Sigyn hugs him warmly and expresses delight at finally meeting him. Later, Rygart and Queen Sigyn visit King Hodor. Rather than sitting on his throne, the king is relaxing in a chair near a window. As it turns out, the three of them are old friends. King Hodor informs Rygart about Athens conquering the neighboring countries, and that the Krishnan army is already engaged in a battle with Athens at the sea's border, led by Zess. Hodor asks for Rygart's assistance, despite knowing he possesses no magical abilities. Balder inquires about King Hodor's trust in Rygart, to which Queen Sigyn reveals they are friends from their college days. She shares that Rygart was able to stop the clash between King Hodor and Zess during their time in college. King Hodor takes Rygart to a mine to show him something intriguing they had found while mining quartz. To Rygart's surprise, it's a golem and a corpse that is believed to be a millennium old. King Hodor informs Rygart that they could not detect any essence of magic from the carcass and speculates that the golem might be able to function without magic. King Hodor implores Rygart to help, but the latter suggests surrendering instead. Unfortunately, King Hodor reveals that the condition for surrender is executing the Krishnan royal family and Queen Sigyn. Suddenly, an attack occurs, causing the mine to crumble. Rygart finds himself on the golem, and as guards try to take King Hodor to safety, they encounter an enemy golem. With no other option, Rygart gets inside the golem and accidentally activates it, causing it to come to life. Rygart then jumps out of the mine. Lee is taken aback as another golem appears, prompting her to open fire on Rygart's golem. In response, Rygart moves forward and forcefully slams Lee's golem into the wall, rendering her unconscious. While searching the area, Rygart finds a large sword, but he notices Hodor trying to communicate with him. Before he can respond, he is attacked by Zess's golem, sustaining multiple gunshots. Zess approaches Rygart's golem, ready to deliver a fatal blow, but Hodor reveals that Rygart is inside. Zess doesn't believe it. Despite this revelation, Zess refuses to believe it as Rygart doesn't possess the strength to activate a golem. Rygart attempts to communicate with Zess, but Zess still shoots at him. Rygart narrowly evades the bullets and tries to fight, but Zess continues to attack. Fortunately, Balder and his team arrive, engaging Zess and Lee, forcing them to retreat. As Rygart is being transported to Sigyn's laboratory, Sigyn inquires about his condition and orders him to provide a detailed report on the events that transpired. Elsewhere, Zess is served dinner by Cleo. Lee teases Cleo for having big opie despite being 12 years old. She then sends her off to patrol. Lee mentions the sighting of a new golem, but Zess dismisses it as insignificant. Rygart pays a visit to Sigyn while she's polishing the golem. She reveals that the golem's technology is distant from modern times. She asks Rygart to recount everything that happened during the battle. Sigyn gets excited and carelessly moves closer to Rygart. He nervously asks her to step back, reminding her he's a man. Sigyn complies and asks Rygart to redo the report. General True and his team return and order the golem to be scrapped. However, when they discover that it is the Queen's order, they leave quietly. As they depart, one of True's teammates taunts the golem, calling it Broken Blade. In the morning, Zess and his team destroy 20 Krishnan golems to force the king to surrender. Benantin comes under attack from Zess's army. Rygart immediately activates the golem, but it remains motionless. He instructs Sigyn to inform the general that he needs some time and wants to speak to Zess. The city of Benantin, which serves as the capital of Krishna, is currently experiencing an invasion by the army of Zess. The enemy forces have been targeting and successfully defeating the golems that Krishna relies on for defense. This fight started because the Commonwealth of Athens thought there wouldn't be enough resources in the future, so they attacked Krishna. Before this, General Haeckel's group couldn't progress at the Mizoram stronghold. However, Zess's group, which had 5 Artemis units, surprisingly attacked Benantin. The city of Benantin held significant importance due to its location in a large oasis, rich in valuable resources such as reactive quartz and fishing opportunities, which made a prime target for the enemy. Meanwhile, in the capital city of Athens called Ilios, the leaders in charge are reviewing the war's progress with the help of the Secretary of War, Locus. Locus shares that they suffer heavy losses in terms of golems and soldiers. The officials are concerned about how to inform the public and Orlando's participation. However, when they receive news about Zess's successful surprise attack, they are relieved to hear that the war effort is going well in some areas. Meanwhile, Krishna's army is heading out to fight Zess's platoon. Balder suggests True stay behind this time, but True declines the offer and leaves with a massive sword. Later, Elect reports to Zess about the advancement of the mission. He reveals that the enemy's 3 golems have been defeated. Out of nowhere, the gate swings open and a towering golem emerges, carrying a sign. Elect reveals the code to Zess. He realizes that Rygart is operating the golem and decides to meet him himself. Zess reminisces about his first meeting with Rygart, where he rescued him from a group of bullies, and their friendship blossomed thereafter. Zess approaches Rygart and asks him how he's operating the golem. Rygart asks the reason for attacking, and Zess replies with the justifiable reason. On the other side, True is charging towards Zess' squad from the west, but is already spotted by Elect and immediately signals Zess. Zess then starts shooting towards Rygart while he flees. Balder with his force attacks Zess from the front gate. Meanwhile, True and his men are forced to retreat after losing 6 golems to Lee and others. While chasing True's squad, Lee finds Rygart hiding as she aims towards Rygart. He jumps and flees, but much higher than modern golem. Lee senses danger from the abilities of the ancient golem and decides to finish him for once at all. Lee shoots Rygart multiple times, but to her surprise, Rygart dodges the bullets with his sword. Lee continues to shoot at Rygart's golem while he recklessly swings his lance. Rygart is using the golem's claymore to defend himself from Lee's shooting. Lee tries to get in close combat, but Rygart strikes him down. Rygart notices an unknown countdown on the screen. Lee then rushes towards Rygart and damages his golem. Rygart overpowers Lee's golem and tears apart her golem's hands, questioning the surprising strength of his golem. After losing an arm, Lee decides to maintain some distance, but her golem falls due to an injured foot caused by the attack of Balder's man, who was sent after to protect Rygart. The soldier tries to kill Lee, but Rygart stops him from killing her. As the two of them argue, Lee sees the opportunity to attack and kills the soldier. After witnessing this, Rygart rushes towards her in a fit of rage and throws his lance, destroying Lee's other arm. Severely injured, Lee calls Rygart a barbarian and kills herself. Meanwhile, Zess orders his squad to retreat while fighting Balder's army. Later at night, Harder decides to surrender, but Balder refuses to approve the idea and asks Harder permission to fight again for him. Elsewhere, Cleo is depressed about Lee's death. Zess blames himself for Lee's death, but Elect blames Lee for her mistake. The following day, Rygart decided to take his leave and bid his farewell to Sigyn. Rygart visits Dan's grave, where he learns about his wife and his upcoming child and blames himself for his death. Balder appears, who also seems to visit the dead. Balder reassures Rygart that he is not to blame for Dan's death and requests his assistance for the upcoming battle, but Rygart refuses and departs. Hoder approaches Rygart and presents him with a parting gift. After some reflection, Rygart changes his mind and decides to keep fighting for Hoder. Sigyn manages to decipher the ancient language used on the golem, revealing the inscription, "Let us fight destiny." General Borkus is listening to his daughter Leda playing the violin, but is interrupted by his subordinate Colonel Io. Io informs Borkus about the ongoing situation in war and also concludes that General Locus has transferred full command of the Krishnan subjugation forces to Borkus. Borkus and Io say their farewell to Leda and promise to come back. In the past, Rygart attempted to rescue a bird from a cat's grasp despite Zess' advice to abandon the effort. However, he persisted, and at that moment, Hoder arrived and volunteered to assist him. Rygart utilized Hoder as a step stool to save the bird, and thus began a new chapter in their friendship. In the present, Hoder honors Rygart with a sword and the duty secondary heavy knight under the command of General Balder. Rygart surprises everyone with his golem having massive armor, which eventually earns the name of Delphine. Meanwhile, Zess is wondering about the conditions that Rygart was about to state. Elect is notifying Zess about the remaining weapons and ammunition. Elect also predicts that with the remaining firearms, they can afford to fight one more battle. Zess orders to retreat to the border after one more strike on Benantin. Cleo, in a depressing state, determines to take down Rygart's golem. The following day, Siegen provides an explanation regarding the modifications made to the golem's armor, which is crafted from leftover medium plates. However, due to the heavy armor, Delphine's abilities are reduced to 80%. On the positive side, Delphine is able to disengage the armor whenever required. Siegen notices and inquires Rygart about fighting, to which he replies that he already has killed 2 people and he doesn't regret doing it again. Balder informs Rygart about the enemy movement and orders him to commence the operation. Balder also concludes that capturing an enemy is far more difficult than killing them. Balder warns him that if he tries to capture them, he will likely lose 3 of his people. Meanwhile, Zess with his platoon are on their way for the last strike, but on the way, Zess finds out they are being surrounded by Krishnan golems. He immediately orders his platoon to abort the mission and retreat. While the squad is escaping, they are attacked by the golems. Zess orders to rescue Cleo, whose golem is severely damaged. Zess and Argath defeated 3 golems and continue to escape. After getting a bit far, Argath notices something approaching them. When they look carefully, they find out it's Rygart's golem coming towards them with great speed. Argath tries to stop him, but because of his massive armor, he easily scatters through him. Elec suggests escaping, but Zess starts shooting at him until he runs out of ammo. Rygart sees the opportunity and disengages his armor, which results in increased speed. He aims to destroy Zess's rifle to capture him, but Zess dodges him. Rygart uses his sword to slow down and swiftly gets back to Zess. Unfortunately, instead of hitting the rifle, Rygart accidentally strikes Zess. Krishnan reinforcements appear while Elect orders Cleo to escape while he holds them back, but Cleo, without thinking, rushes towards Rygart fiercely and easily knocks him out with only 2 strikes. Elect is shocked to see this. Balder orders to open fire and make sure that it doesn't hit Delphine. Cleo asks Elect to escape with Zess and decides to fight the whole army by herself. Cleo then creates a smoke screen with a nearby dust. As the Balder's men sight the target, they start firing, but unfortunately, it turns out to be a rifle. Cleo appears from the other side of the flame and beheads the first golem and advances while using it as a shield. Cleo rushes towards other golems, destroying them with a sword. Meanwhile, Elect carefully removes the sword and armor from Zess's golem. Fortunately, Zess is alive, but in a very critical condition. Cleo rushes towards Balder, but gets overpowered by him, losing a golem's arm. Elect informs Cleo about the recovery of Zess and orders her to abort and retreat. Cleo is sprinting towards Elect while Krishnan forces try to stop her. Unfortunately, while running, the golem faces damage by the General True unit. As Cleo's golem scatters and falls, she requests Elect to escape with Captain Zess. Rygart regains his consciousness and finds Balder standing next to him. The first thing Rygart questions is about Zess. Balder informs that Zess successfully escaped. Rygart is glad the battle is over, but Balder states that Krishnan forces are fighting with Athens forces on the border and General Borkus is on his way for the war. Balder warns Rygart that it's only the beginning. Meanwhile, in Athens, massive golems are advancing out of the city. While Locus is discussing with Borkus about feeding the wrong information to people about going to war. Locus also informs Borkus about their quartz mine getting empty. Locus states that the future of Athens is now in Borkus' hands. Balder commences a meeting and admires Narvi for playing a major role in capturing a prisoner and asks for her opinion, but she refuses and leaves with General True. Balder then asks Rygart for suggestions, to which he proposes to release her. Queen Siegen is requesting Balder to let her handle the situation, and Balder agrees. Jurgis, Krishna's prisoner, is introduced to Cleo's golem. He is then ordered to master the golem in a week. Jurgis taunts that he might lose his temper and accidentally shoots his comrades. Cleo decides to rather die than answer any questions, but to her surprise, Siegen orders to remove her cuffs and takes her to a private chamber filled with books. Cleo is surprised to find out how kind and beautiful Siegen is. Siegen pours some tea, but Cleo slams and steals Siegen's firearm. Cleo then asks Siegen to take off her clothes and swap clothes with the guards. While running with Siegen as a hostage, Cleo sees Rygart and hides. Cleo is aiming to shoot Rygart, but fortunately, Grem lands on his head. Rygart reveals to Grem how he and Zess used to take care of him when he was younger. After listening, Cleo rushes towards Rygart and tries to shoot, but to her surprise, the gun is empty. Siegen reveals that she finds guns terrifying, that's why she keeps them empty. On their way to Athens, Elect provides basic first aid to Zess despite his medical background. When Zess asks about the whereabouts of Cleo, Elect fails to provide any information about her location. Later in the evening, Siegen delivers dinner to Cleo, who is stargazing. Cleo questions why she is being housed in private quarters instead of the torture chamber. Siegen responds that she has no issue with living with Cleo, but warns that she will not be as forgiving if Cleo attempts to harm Rygart again in the future. Narvi is arguing about the formation of troops with True, but he explains that she is not being excluded, but instead she will depart later. General True reveals that he volunteered her for the first autonomous squadron. Later, Queen Segan explains that the squad will work as an elite unit under the direct control of the king. Narvi is designated as the captain of the squad. Her team will consist of her elder brother Niall Logan. Stegan requests Rygart to follow Narvi's orders, to which he sarcastically replies that if she asks him to show his nuts, then he will have no choice but to show. After listening to this, both Segan and Narvi furiously point their guns towards Rygart. Segan then reveals that the fifth member of the squad will be Jurgis. Later, while training, Rygart finds himself under attack from Cleo's golem, only to realize that it is Jurgis who is operating against him. Jurgis tells Rygart to pick up a weapon nearby and rushes towards him. Rygart picks a shield nearby, but shockingly Jurgis cuts through the shield with the sword. Rygart seizes Jurgis' sword and attempts to strike him. However, Jurgis is able to defend himself with a lance, which shatters the sword. As Rygart starts to fall back, Jurgis continues to shoot at him. Fortunately, Narvi and Logan arrive to provide assistance, and Niall is able to defeat Jurgis with their help. Later at night, Baldur approaches Rygart to talk about Jurgis. Baldur informs that last year Jurgis killed his own comrades without any reason. Baldur also reveals that Jurgis is his son and asks Rygart to exterminate him if he finds him suspicious. Rygart refuses and tells him to do it himself. The following day, General True with his force leaves for the war. While Rygart practices with his teammates, Hada reveals to Rygart that he will be looking for military aid from Orlando. After a grueling training session, the day of departure finally arrives. Segan meets Rygart, but she appears to be upset. Upon inquiry, Segan reveals that she is worried about Rygart's safety and expresses her hope that he will return unscathed. Meanwhile, General True tragically dies while fighting the enemy's golem. Nike, while standing on her golem, taunts her Athens comrades for being pathetic and having low stamina when one of the soldiers calls her 25-year-old midget. She furiously jumps from her golem, pointing her firearm until Colonel Io appears. Nike starts acting like a child in front of the colonel and asks to give her a pat on the head as a reward. Elsewhere, Baldur with his army appears on the battlefield. To their surprise, they have only 50 Athens golems. Borkus commands his troops to initiate the attack, whereas Baldur instructs his soldiers to open fire on the opposing forces. Elsa observes that the Athenian army is forming a pincer formation, which presents an opportunity to strike at their leaders. To do so, Elsa requests the assistance of 10 golems from Baldur, but he instead offers her 20, with the caveat that she must withdraw if she detects any potential hazards. As Elsa charges Borkus and his squad as she unleashes a barrage of shots. Borkus, impressed by her fierce attack, prepares to defend against it. Unfortunately, due to a miscalculation in her aim, Elsa's golem is pierced by Borkus' weapon. Despite this setback, Borkus and his companions defeat the remaining soldiers. Baldur is astonished to witness that a small force of only 6 golems triumph over their best 20 golems. Upon receiving orders from Borkus, Nike dismantles Elsa's golem, causing a sense of terror throughout the Christian forces. Baldur, attempting to rally his troops, orders them to charge, but their panic state causes them to hesitate. Baldur makes another attempt to spur them into action, and the soldiers slowly regain their composure and move forward. At that moment, Rygart appears on the battlefield and rapidly demolishes the enemy golems with his spiky armor, while Logan provides him with cover fire from the rear. As Narvi, Niall, and Jurgis rush to aid Rygart and Logan, they come to a sudden halt as they witness Jurgis standing motionless in terror, unable to face the impending battle. Narvi and Niall decide to leave him behind and join the fight. Meanwhile, Borkus orders his troops to withdraw, leaving Narvi frustrated that they arrived too late to make a significant impact. As Borkus and his troops retreat, they are ambushed by Jurgis, who easily destroys a golem with a single shot and defeats Nike. Rygart watches from afar as Jurgis takes on the entire squad alone. Narvi scolds Jurgis for not following orders. He then reports that after seeing the enemy, he fled from the area, but Rygart disapproves his claim and reports that Jurgis destroyed 7 enemy golems and partially destroyed 2 officers' units, leading Narvi to forbid Jurgis he use his golem without her approval. Later, Baldur speaks to Rygart about his son, Jurgis, and reveals that a year ago Jurgis was doing routine marching exercise in his golem, when he suddenly fired a comrade and used him as a shield to dispatch 8 more golems without a scratch on himself, and then turned himself in. Upon asking, Baldur confirms that only the initial victim was killed, and that Jurgis spared the other 8. Eventually, a soldier informs them about General True's death. Baldur decided to keep the news away from Captain Narvi because of her admiration for him. Elsewhere, the Borkus squad seethes with anger over their defeat and the loss of their comrades. Determined to avenge their defeat, Nika resolves to annihilate the Krishnan forces. The next day, Narvi's squad receives intel about Borkus's movement towards a village called Pigusa. Rygart becomes anxious as his younger brother resides there and quickly sets off for the village. Upon arrival, Rygart searches for his brother but finds nothing but a trail of corpses. Suddenly, Borkus and his squad launch an attack on Rygart, with Borkus ordering his men not to intervene in the battle. After breaking Rygart's shield, Borkus charges at him and shoots while Rygart jumps and tries to strike. However, Borkus dodges the attack and counterattacks, but Rygart manages to send Borkus's golem flying, though he defends himself with a shield. Borkus gets back up, and despite Rygart's best efforts, he is knocked down. Borkus orders his soldiers to capture and kill Rygart. Later, Rygart wakes up to find Athenian soldiers trying to cut through his golem, but he manages to resist and escape with the help of Narvi's signal from afar. Narvi reprimands him for disobeying orders and orders a retreat, but they are suddenly ambushed by enemies of another squad. Rygart seeks help from Jurgis, but he refuses and pulls out his sword. Jurgis calls Rygart a fellow traitor for putting his team in danger. Jurgis states that the people killed by Rygart deserve to die because of their weak nature and also taunts that their death is not Rygart's fault. Without a second, Rygart furiously attacks Jurgis. Meanwhile, Niall is fighting the Colonel Io. Niall rushes and stabs Io with his lance but immediately dodges it with his shield. Io slashes Niall's golem's hand and head. Niall gladly accepts his fate and requests to make the death painless. Rygart and Jurgis are engaging in a fierce battle. At the same time, Captain Narvi is fighting Nika, who easily overpowers her when she's just about to crush her golem. Narvi swiftly sneaks out from behind and hides. Nika destroys the golem despite being crushed, but is luckily unaware of Narvi's whereabouts. Jurgis states that there's no difference between him and Rygart. Rygart reveals that Baldur said the same thing, but concludes that he makes him sick acting all high and mighty, but unlike Rygart, he is a genius who can accomplish anything. However, he tends to waste his talents by fooling around. Jurgis taunts and reveals that Rygart is fighting for Queen Cian. Jurgis offers Rygart that if he defeats him in the duel, he will place the queen in his arms. Rygart declines and says that the only reason he is fighting is to protect the royal family. Both of them agree for the second round. Rygart goes into a counter stance while kneeling. Jurgis seeks the opportunity and attacks with fearsome footwork. Rygart gets up by tackling him. When he's about to deliver the finishing blow, they both get attacked by Nika. Nika rushes towards Rygart, but Jurgis intervenes and protects him. Nika tries to crush Jurgis' golem, but thanks to the golem's agile nature, he slips through Nika's grip and destroys her golem. As he is about to launch a finishing blow, the Spartan squad sent by Borkus intervenes. Jurgis kicks Rygart's golem away to safety and engages in a fierce battle. Jurgis kills Tuples by shooting through his golem. Delphine is shooting towards Jurgis, while Telton swings his scythe from behind. Jurgis dodges Telton and shoots Ban, who is about to hit. Delphine orders Telton to lie down on the ground. Both Leto and Jurgis counterattack. Thanks to Jurgis' incredible accuracy, he is able to behead Leto's golem, but unfortunately, Jurgis gets shot in the leg. Delphine stabs from the back but gets terrified by Jurgis' death stare. Bades appears and offers Jurgis to surrender as he is descending and offers Jurgis to join Athens. Jurgis single-handedly kills Telton, Ban, and Delphine with a broken golem. After witnessing this, Bades gets enraged and shoots the other leg of Jurgis' golem and is about to stab him, but Rygart throws a broken piece of a sword at him. However, it only grazes Bades' golem and stabs Jurgis' golem, while Rygart slips into a ditch, but fortunately, Jurgis sneaks out and shoots Bades, while a swarm of enemy army appears and captures Jurgis. After General Baldur successfully saves Rygart from the ditch, he decides to return to Benantin. At the same time, Jurgis in cuffs is presented to General Borkus, who first finds it regrettable to kill such a talented pilot. However, Borkus still kills Jurgis by shooting him in the head. Colonel Io reports about the rumor of Cleo being held as a prisoner by Krishnan forces. Borkus then grants permission to rescue Cleo. On the other hand, Captain Narvi is able to find Logan injured in his golem. Niall also appears, who is miraculously alive, and the trio decides to go back to the Benantin. While the officials report to King Hodor about the current situation, Sakura states that the Borkus army will arrive tomorrow morning and they only have mere 60 golems to defend themselves. Baldur reveals that they have a chance of beating the Borkus army in the capital, and Rygart asks Baldur to drop him off somewhere until Delphine is fully charged. Sakura sees Borkus with his army of 90 golem advancing towards Benantin. Sakura immediately orders her men to get into defense formation. The Borkus army disperses and he decides to attack the main gate by himself. The Krishnan army replies with open fire. Colonel Io is successfully able to cross the walls. Borkus is attacked by Sakura while he's trying to cross the wall. Balder is also able to make it. While Queen Sigan is making a weapon against enemies, Balder orders his men to fight. Meanwhile, the Delphine is being repaired. Sigan goes to her room to get some parts where she finds Cleo in her uniform. Sigan reveals to Cleo that she is creating a weapon to destroy the Athenian army, but only Rygart can use that weapon. Rygart immediately jumps towards the capital after activating Delphine. Benantin, the capital of Krishna, is in the midst of chaos because of war. Sakura rushes towards Borkus and manages to strike 2 of his men. However, she is ambushed by the remaining members of Borkus' group. Luckily, Rygart rushes to help Sakura by defeating Borkus' men. He pulls out his sword and tries to stab Borkus, but to his surprise, the sword gets shattered. Borkus mocks Rygart's lack of ability and declares his intention to take over the palace to find what he seeks. This enrages Rygart to swing his weapon towards Borkus. Meanwhile, one of Sigan's guards informs her of Delphine's arrival. Rygart and Borkus are engaged in a fierce battle. Rygart throws his axe and kunais in the direction of Borkus, but he easily dodges them. Borkus tries to push Rygart off the bridge, but Rygart hangs onto his weapons and climbs. While fighting, Rygart is able to tear off the joint weapons from Borkus' golem. Borkus notices that Rygart is only using melee weapons but not a rifle, to which he guesses that Rygart is one of the special individuals who is unable to use magic. Meanwhile, Cleo is running when suddenly Colonel Io appears and rescues her. As she leaves, she reminisces about Sigan. Io is attacked by Narvi while Nile and Logan fight with the Athenian army. Sigan successfully created the weapon for Rygart and delivers the weapon herself while he fights with Borkus. Elsewhere, Narvi strikes down Io's golem and Io orders Cleo to escape on her own. Narvi and Io engage in a fierce battle, but Io overpowers Narvi and is about to finish her. Fortunately, Logan and Nile arrive for help and defeat Io. Rygart is trying to strike Borkus with his new weapon, but Borkus dodges it every time. Rygart slams Borkus to the ground and then slashes his golem. Borkus throws his sword towards him and starts kicking it, demanding to see Rygart's face. Rygart jumps away and strikes Borkus one more time, destroying his golem. General Borkus comes out of his golem and starts shooting Rygart's golem. Rygart then kills him with the final blow. With the fight ended, Athenian forces temporarily retreat. The end.